everybody, welcome back to the Roker Rapport. We're back to regular scheduling now that the season has officially begun, and hopefully you're all as excited as we are. I'm feeling quite optimistic. I think some of the lads with me today feel the same way, although you never know. We've got James, Walshy, Jimmy and Copley joining me today. How are you all feeling on this fine weekend, lads?
Good. Yeah, very well.
Bit hungover. Bit hungover. You've got to be a bit hungover on a Sunday. Well, there's loads to get through, so we should probably start with the Derby match on Friday. Some real positives for me to take from this game, I think. But yeah, I'll pass it on to Copley. So, Grayson's men, his first outing. What do you reckon? You impressed?
I was impressed. I was extremely pessimistic leading up to the game, with the match being televised. I was on Sky. I was thinking that it could be a bit of a killer. A defeat would turn the atmosphere a bit toxic, and I wasn't really looking forward to the game. But the first 10 minutes we played really well, and then we conceded against the run of play. Galloway got caught underneath the ball, then he got skinned on the line, and I think Billy Jones lost his man at the back post for a pretty simple goal, really. So I felt a bit downhearted after that, and yeah, I predicted before the game that if they scored first, we'd crumble. So it was refreshing that we didn't, and we fought back and we continued to play football, and we got back on a level playing field with them, and still continued to press them. And even Galloway, who made the mistake for the goal, he seemed to really grow into the game, and he got up in support of McGeady, and McGeady was really good as well. There was a lot of interesting stuff that we saw in the match. Billy Jones looks decent at this level. Honeyman did a job on the right-hand side, and I was just impressed by the general work rate and graft. And there's a clear pattern of play that Grayson's trying to introduce. So on the whole, I feel like a slight feel-good factor's back.
What about you, James? What do you make of it?
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty solid performance, like plenty of effort and desire. I mean, McGeady, Grabban, Katz, Honeyman, they were probably the standouts. I think for Honeyman, it's probably the best I've seen him. I thought he looked a lot more comfortable on the ball, didn't he? And he had a bit more time. I'd like to have seen Kelly come on in the second half, but I'm sure we'll get round to that later. On a slightly negative side, I mean, you could say that Steele looked a bit shaky in the first half, didn't he? And had Derby actually had a decent striker, maybe they'd have scored a couple in the second half. I think Chris Martin's almost hit it out the stadium, hasn't he, when he went one-on-one in the second half. But, you know, Derby are a solid championship side, so you've got to say that this season might not be the disaster we were all predicting, or some of us were predicting. I mean, McGeady looks an absolute steal for what we paid for him. I mean, considering the money the likes of Borough are spending, he looks absolute mustard. I think he looks really, really, really good. I'm not convinced by Galloway. I think he was really, really poor for the opening goal. But midfield-wise, I don't think there's going to be many teams in the Championship who've got a better midfield, 2 or 3, than we do. I mean, Lee Cattermole was absolutely well. He was good in possession. He's actually quite creative. I mean, he was closing down up into the final third. I thought he was absolutely fantastic. And when you've got someone like McGeady, I mean, it's pretty clear for us all to see that Grayson's plan was get the ball to McGeady as early as possible, because pretty much everything good that we did came through him. And he just looked unplayable at times, and he's only going to get better with more match fitness, isn't he? He had a bit more time. If we had a decent striker, I think we'd have won the game. Vaughan, he works his socks off, and he's fairly solid in the air, but you know, he's in dire need of a goal, isn't he? Mm-hmm. When he kind of snatched a bit of his attempt in the second half. Sorry, he almost, a bit like Danny Graham a couple of years ago. He just kind of needs one, just almost bouncing off his arse, just to kind of get him off the mark, get his confidence up. But all in all, I don't think any of us can massively complain. I think Grayson played it pretty safe, and thankfully, in the first half, we didn't concede that second when Steele spilt it, because it could have turned a bit nasty if we'd have gone 2-0 down. But, all in all, pretty decent, and certainly a lot of positives to take into later on this week and next weekend.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I quite enjoyed it, actually, for a change after the dourness of last year. It was, as been mentioned, I did worry when we went 1-0 down that we were just going to revert back to type. Started so well, like positive on the front foot, positive, and then that just a gut punch of a goal. I thought because I was hoping just don't crumble again. But there's a bit more resilience in this team, and it's nice change to see us just going straight back at Derby, trying to get this equaliser, which thankfully came, and luckily Lewis Grabban actually put this one away, because I was praying that James Vaughan didn't miss, because if he'd missed another penalty, then it could have killed him.
Pen, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah. Well, hit the net. Also, it's Scott Carson showing him. I thought that was a bit weird, him showing him the entire goal. I just thought that was a bit of an odd thing.
So on that note, Carson, does he not look to anyone else like he's come out of the witness protection programme or something like that?
Oh, Richie Keogh. Richie Keogh looks like he's seen a war crime. What's wrong with him? What's wrong with his eyes?
I'm looking at it, I'm like, is that Carson? Oh, it is. Oh, look at that. That's why he's such a good keeper. But
What was that with the flat ball as well?
man.
The flat ball was really weird.
The what?
The flat ball in the first was it first half or second half? I can't remember. Carson was saying the ball was flat.
Yeah,
he threw it to a central defender, and the central defender gave him the ball back and said, "Stop moaning."
I think the also same. Anyway, carry on. Sorry, Monty.
Yeah, no, it's all right. The main thing I took out of that game is there's such a difference between the Premier League and the Championship. We've been worrying all this season. I mean, obviously, we might still finish bottom of the league with like 10 points, but from if Derby is supposed to be one of the better teams, then I didn't see much from them to suggest that we've got much worry in this league. I mean, it might be a bit presumptuous, but Ndong and Catamol in that midfield axis look brilliant. Huddleston, apart from that one pass out to Russell for the goal, he didn't really do anything, and he's cost £2 million, which we don't have. And the gulf is huge, and spending 40 million on whatever Middlesbrough are doing, I don't think that's going to get you up. It's just being better. I mean, we've got players in that squad that we might think are crap, but in the Championship they're going to look good. Like Honeyman, for example. I mean, I'm not his biggest fan, but he looked really, really decent on Friday night. And I don't know if that is a case of he's found his level, or we were just better as a team, or whatever, or Derby just aren't as good as we think they are. And it's just the gulf is amazing. Say for like the Chris Martin chance, if that falls to any Premier League striker, that's in and you've lost. And David Nugent, if that wasn't David Nugent, say that was, I don't know, a Premier League striker, he's leathering that in at and that's 3-1, good night. So off the basis of that game, I mean, we've got a very hard run with Norwich, Sheffield Wednesday and Leeds to come. I'm not that worried anymore. So it was really nice. It was a good game to watch, exciting in a way, and didn't get beat and should have won it. So yeah, really enjoyed it.
I wouldn't go as far as to say we should have won, but the one thing that was the main positive that's already been touched on is that we came back from 1-0 down. There was a 5-minute period where you're wondering, are we going to break? Are we going to capitulate here? And we played better after going a goal down, and that was the main positive. Like Walshy said, I think one of the main fun things about being in the Championship this year is that we're going to be competitive every week. I remember sitting on this podcast after we lost to Middlesbrough, the second worst team in the league above, and we looked as if we could have played that game for 12 hours without scoring. And I thought, thank God next year we're at least going to see a Sunderland team that can compete every week, that will have shots every week, that can at least be competitive. And I feel as if, yes, we saw that on Friday. We saw sort of how we can compete in that league and how we can look good. A couple of things I'd add, a couple of observations. Ndong has to stop shooting. He should be fined if he shoots from further than 25 away. I know he scored that brilliant goal against Palace, but he should be fined if he's shooting in those sort of areas. He could have slipped in Honeyman a couple of times, and he just took the worst shots imaginable. I did have one, oh shit, we're playing in the Championship moment. It was after about the third ball over the top to Vaughan in the first 10 minutes. I did think, oh God, we're not a Premier League team anymore. I'm going to have to get used to players like Brown in, get used to seeing balls hooved out for throw-ins when Premier League players would control them and pass to the fullback.
We've been saying that for years, mate.
That is true. That is true. We've been awful for a long time, but there was definitely a moment in the game where it was like, oh yeah, now I remember what the Championship looks like. I mean, even watching Leeds Bolton today, it was kind of like this Leeds team looked like one of the best teams in this division, and they're still nothing special.
Sorry. I say, you're in the Championship. Dave Nugent's there.
yeah, that too. But yeah, no, it was a very good performance. Bit concerning the way we've in the last 20 minutes. Bit concerning that Chris Martin had that golden chance, which would have meant a loss. But all in all, yeah, more positives than negatives. So bring it on.
I think it's worth noting as well that Derby are a pretty experienced Championship outfit. You've got, as you mentioned, Chris Martin and David Nugent, who at that level have done well before. And you've also got Andre Wisdom, that just signed for about $4 million. And Scott Carson and Tom Huddleston might be past it, but they're both ex-internationals at that level. They're decent. So to take a point from Derby in a game in which we're trailed early on, and then no one's had chances to win the game as well, has to be a positive for me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me in particular, I took a lot of fight from that game. That's what I saw. I agree with what most of you have said. Some of you mentioned that specifically. There were the way we went at Derby. I mean, yeah, we no longer have the luxury of saying, "Oh, well, it's only Derby." Do you know what I mean? Because they're on the same lesson, and as Rolsey said earlier, they're actually a decent side. I mean, in a sense, it's great that we can fight against a team like that. And it's great that we can say, oh, well, Derby are one of the better teams in the Championship, supposed to be. And we were essentially bossing most of that game. I don't know, though. I think it's still early days with regards to whether or not that's actually telling of what they'll be like, or what all of the rest of the teams in the Championship will be like. We just don't know, do we, really? And there's been some crazy results already. But, yeah, for my part, I really enjoyed it. And I think, we'll talk more about the new transfers and their debuts and things like that later, but as everyone's mentioned, McGeady, fantastic. For me, that was the main thing I took away from that game. I was watching him play and thinking, where have you been all my life, basically? You know what I mean? Where have you been for the last 2-3 years? We could have used you in the Premiership. But, for the most part, I was happy. I came away more optimistic than I thought I would be, and I think a lot of people did as well. I think part of that is to do with 6 years it had been since a manager had won their opening game. I'm not sure if one of those was a draw, actually, to be fair. I'm not entirely sure on that statistic, but I think we were all expecting that. Do you know what I mean? That's a statistic that was bandied about a lot as well, and that was something I really didn't want to have to deal with. But we've got some questions anyway to take us straight into the questions now. There's a couple of really good ones, actually, on Twitter. I think I'll start with talking about the actual tactics. I'll fire this one at you, Copley. This is from Jordan Goling, and he's asking, not much has been said about the fact we didn't make a sub when we were looking so physically and mentally tired late on. Any thoughts why? What do you make of it, mate?
Well, we were talking before the podcast started, and I think Grayson was scared of kind of disrupting the defensive unit, and kind of was happy with the point in the end, which opening day of the season to steady the ship after going a goal down isn't too bad. But I think the game was just crying out for Khazri. Even Giovasoro or the grit of Gooch would have really helped, I think. But it's a smaller side, and Grayson's still feeling his squad out. He's still trying to work out what the can and can't do on the pitch. So I was disappointed at the time, but I wouldn't look too much into it. He's the manager at the end of the day, and he's paid to make these decisions. So there must have been some thinking behind it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think 90% of fans were sat there thinking we're in dire need of fresh layer. McGeady looked knackered, didn't he? I thought it wouldn't have been too much of a risk to maybe bring Khazri on for someone like Aidan McGeady, but if he'd have made a change and it left us more open at the back and we conceded, we'd all be, it'd be the end of the world again. We'd been beaten on the opening day of the Championship, and we're thinking, where do we go from here? So to play it safe was fairly smart. I would like to think that once he's got a better understanding of the squad and a better understanding of how this squad's going to perform in this league, he'd probably change things around. But at the present moment, he doesn't. None of us know how someone like Khazri would perform at this level. We all think he'd tear them a new one, but would he? Is it? I actually thought it wasn't as physical as I was expecting. I don't know if that's because Derby, as Damo said before, we don't know. Are they a benchmark of a solid Championship side or not? I think they massively missed people like Will Hughes and Tom Ince because they did lack pace going forward. So it'll be really interesting to see when we go up against, say, a Norwich or a Leeds, how we do perform. Because, if we can put in as good or if not better performances against those type of sides, we could stand a really good chance of going up. I think there's definitely the basis of a really good squad there. So hopefully once we've got a better understanding of how this league works, Grayson will be a bit more adventurous in those kind of situations.
I think it definitely was a mistake. I think we're giving him a pass because he's a new manager. It's probably the biggest game he's managed in, 7 or 8 years, but I do think it was a mistake not to look at Kazri, not to look at Gooch, not to look to freshen it up. Copley and those very, very well said in terms of why it was understandable that he didn't make a sub, but I do think it was a mistake. Just to circle back to Derby quickly, it might be my natural scepticism and cynicism, but I do wonder if they're a team that we match up quite well against. Derby are the sort of team that don't score a lot of goals, had one of the best defensive records in the Championship last year, a lot of ex-Premier League experience, and I do wonder whether them being an older, slower, more resolute team, they're the sort of team that was nice for us to bet back into, where there was some familiarity there, where there was, like you said, a lack of pace and energy within gone, and whether maybe when we come up against some of the more energetic, younger sides, it's going to come out that way. That might be total. I mean, it might just be that I haven't looked at the Championship squads in depth, that I haven't watched a lot of the league, and that Derby, who are, 7th or 8th favourites for the title, are actually reflective of the fact it is a league that we're going to be stronger in. But I do wonder whether Huddleston, Johnson, they're the sort of players that we look good against, that we see playing against. And I think that's going to be an interesting thing to look for. I mean, Norwich's team, I don't know a great deal about. They've brought in a lot of foreign players that haven't played in England before. But it's going to be interesting to see whether this Derby game's reflective of the fact that our squad's better than we've given credit for, or whether Derby were just an older team that we matched up well against in the open day of the season when no one really knows where anyone stands.
Interesting. That is a really interesting concept. Actually, I can see where you're coming from here. I'm personally of the train of thought that Grayson was aware of the fragility of the team, but I do think at the same time, I think that a stronger manager perhaps would have made the effort. When we're talking about, we don't know how Kazri's going to do at this level. Well, he's doing well at this level, and realistically, the amount of time that Grayson spent with him, he should know that he'll be doing well at this level. But I'm still of the train of thought that he was wary because he didn't want to lose, and there's that huge risk, isn't there? And I think that's something that was perhaps wrong about Moyes, because Moyes had this ego about him, and he sometimes put himself across as the sort of person who would try and force a victory in games. You know what I mean? And he'd make wholesale changes sometimes. Something he'd leave it until 10 minutes, but none that he did seem to be. It didn't never seem to be tactically appropriate to the situation he was in, and it was interesting watching that because I could just imagine when I was looking at Grayson. I mean, Grayson, we mentioned it already in a couple of articles, but Grayson's face when their goal went in, it was incredible. Really, it was like
seething, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was absolutely seething. He was gutted. Absolutely gutted, and that was
good to see.
That was good to see. Yeah, it was good, and it was a similar thing when we scored up the other end. Do you know what I mean? There was elation and joy, and you would expect that from managers. But instead of again, we can only really compare him to our last few managers. But even Allardyce wasn't. He never looked that gutted. He never looked that distraught. Or maybe that's because he's a better manager. I don't know. But the reality is that. And Grayson had that look on his face, like he shared it with everybody. He shared it with every single Sunderland fan. Go on.
I'd say that was because he sees us as a challenge, and he's honoured to be in a team like us, whereas our other managers, apart from, I'd say, Poyet, they seem to think that we're doing us a favour. And it was like, well, if you lose, it's not really my fault. They didn't give a shit. Admittedly, because Moyes was a prick. Allardyce knew if he left, he could get something better, and he did. Advocat was like, well, he was wondering why he was here as well. See, Grayson, it's refreshing to see that he's as much as part of this team as all the players. He kicks every ball. He said after in his press conference that he felt absolutely shattered because he was kicking every ball and he was just so involved in it. And when we did concede, he was seething, but the first thing he was doing was cajoling all these players, telling them to keep your heads up. Like we're not being that team from last season, and we're not going to have a debacle like we had against Celtic. He's like, we've got to get back into this because we are better than we are better than a lot of these teams in this league, and we've got to start acting like that. We're very, very, very early on, but we've got to have this mindset that we are better than these other teams.
Well, I mean, you talk about Celtic as well. That's probably a lot to do with his hesitancy to bring anyone on, to change any kind of balance. And particularly, I mean, we're saying that McGeady was knackered by the end, and he was. But if you'll also note that it was in the last few minutes that we had some better chances, and we still. So it wasn't as if he didn't make the changes and we were pushed back and pushed back and pushed back. He didn't make the changes. There was the odd slip, but there'd been that in the first half anyway when everybody had fresh legs. And towards the end of the game, we were still dominating. So I don't. It's 6 and 2 threes really. I don't think he did anything wrong in particular, and I'm not entirely sure that it was the best thing to do. But at the end of the day, we came out with the point, so that's something to start us off.
I'm impressed with his with his post-match press conference as well. His comments saying it's a slow process, but we've got to take positive steps. And he pointed out he hasn't got a magic wand, and he's learning on the job as well. He's learning about this squad. So I think it's crucial just to give him time to work and not to question him too much. I think one of the lads said earlier, give him a couple of passes early on, because he's still figuring his way out around the Sunderland dressing room, around the stadium, and he just needs a bit of time, I think.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, as Walshy said earlier, he is very much desiring to be part of this. It is an honour for him, and that's what we were looking for all along. It's what we've all been saying for a long time. I mean, it's what he says about the players. He wants the players to come in that actually want to be there, that actually want to play for the club. It just so happens that that's very convenient because we can't afford to pay anybody who doesn't want to be at the club, but that's fine too. That works both ways. So yeah, it does fit into what we need. But it was great to see that, and it is, in a way, it's considering that of the managers that were just mentioned, I mean, how many of them were actually top quality managers? I mean, Advocat, maybe. Allardyce, for me personally, certainly a top quality manager.
I agree with Allardyce.
And this is it.
At
so
time,
what
Moyes
we were doing, I didn't even consider him. That's how pathetic his fucking CV is to me now. He didn't even cross my mind there. But with that in mind, how many journeyman managers have we had? So basically people of the same level as Grayson have we had, and we've given them 6 months, 9 months or whatever to learn their trade essentially, or learn their place and earn their spot with the team, who haven't felt as passionate. I mean, we can certainly say Canny felt passionate, but he's passionate when he sleeps, do you know what I mean? So it's just it's just it's a nut. But so I think that's a really good thing. I think that's a good thing we can take, that he was very passionate, very into the game, and hopefully we didn't see any of that sort of feeling sorry for himself, like, I knew better, I knew I should have done this, if they just listened to me, it would have been. I don't think so like that. And I think what we will see is, if we see any losses in the near future, which we undoubtedly will, because that's just the way it works, I think after that, I'm expecting from Grayson a kind of some blame. I'm expecting him to shoulder a lot of the blame. I am kind of expecting him to protect his players and shelter them in the way that Moyes didn't. I think we'll see great things from that. But talking,
I definitely agree that he'll try and shelter his players. Here, reading and listening to players that have played under him in the past, and opinions on him, and Preston fans talking about him, that that on the whole, the squads that he's had, they love him. He's one of these managers. He likes to get in there with the lads, and he likes to try and be part of them. And he wants to build some sort of he wants to build a feel good atmosphere in the place. All we can compare him with is the absolute clusterfuck that was David Moyes, which couldn't have been any more different. No. The man was just so negative from the outset. So let's hope he can continue to be positive. And I think we're all behind him, aren't we? That everyone seems to be pulling together for once. So if we can, get a few more positive results, I'm fairly optimistic. I'm certainly more optimistic than I was before Friday.
It's easy to be. Yeah, as I said, it is nice as well.
But as we said before, how bad has it been that a 1-1 draw with Derby and we're all positive?
It's more than that. It's more than that. It's been able to. It's to enjoy a game of football that they're trying, and they know that they're committed to it. I mean, what we watched last season is just a bunch of footballers who couldn't give less of a shit playing for us. And now, I mean, these new lads we've brought in, they all see us as an opportunity. I'm willing James Vaughan to score his goal, because you can tell this is the biggest. Obviously, apart from when he was at Everton, well, this is the biggest move of his career. He never thought he'd be playing for Sunderland when he signed for Bury, like a season after. And we didn't have that last year. We didn't have players that really cared. And now we seem to, again, we're reading a lot into one game of football. I mean, even like Jason Steele, he's probably going to get dropped pretty soon. But you can tell how much he really wants to do well here, because he's local, and again, from another player who thought Sunderland wouldn't come knocking on his door. I mean, it's just so refreshing. Just to enjoy it for a change.
Well, see, can I interject? Sorry, before you say anything, Copley, just to interject for a second. When you say about Steele, and he's likely to be dropped soon, and you're talking about his passion, like people wanting to be here, even if it's not passion. But does anyone recall it was the pre-season game where our other goalkeeper, I can't even remember his name now. His name's completely gone. Yeah, there we go. Completely gone from me. Yeah. And after the match, he ran over to his girlfriend in the stands, and then he seemed like it all seemed very like, oh God, I can't believe I might have got a contract. So he seemed chuffed, but at the time he seemed like a far better keeper. But I mean,
I think it's just because he was. I don't think he got thrown straight in because he only signed like on Wednesday, and Grayson said he hadn't trained for a week, so. So I imagine he'll probably play against Bury.
Yeah,
I imagine he'll play against Bury.
Sorry, what were you going to say, Copley? Carry on, mate.
Sorry.
The thing is with Steele, if Grayson's gonna pay a £500,000 fee and give him the number one shirt, then he's got to kind of back him in the early games until he does make maybe a game-changing mistake and Reuter gets the opportunity to force a win. What I will say, though, is that it's nice to have positivity, as the lads have said, especially after last year and Moyes' dourness and losing every week. It is nice to see everybody pulling in the direction, and even though the stadium wasn't full, there was kind of like a positivity and a bit more of an upbeat feel. And contrast that with last season, I think it just shows how in the shit we're, because we've come to the Championship and a couple of positive signings, and signings that haven't cost the earth, and they're not the best players in the world, but because they want to be here and because they're working hard for the shirt and they see the club as a step up, then it's kind of the positivity is permeated the club, and it's nice to see. It's nice, isn't it?
Mm.
This is my first time on the pod in a while, actually. I think it's my first time since Grayson's appointed. When we appointed him and I found out Ellis Short was staying on for another year, I was absolutely gutted. More so with Short than with Grayson, but I'm still very, very sceptical as to what's going on here. Every permanent signing we've made is 29 and over. So I kind of wonder, what is the end game here? Baines said he was going to bring in younger players to try and sell them on for a profit. Maybe that was idealistic. Maybe he didn't realise quite how bad a situation the club was in. Maybe we've had to adapt a bit. But I do sort of wonder what's happening here. We brought in a Championship journeyman manager to take over a limited squad. We're 11th favourites for promotion this season. And I do just sort of wonder whether we have just entered into mediocrity here. I think with Grayson, any fears of League One are gone. Any fears of the absolute worst happening this season are gone. But I do worry that in appointing a journeyman manager who's never really sniffed promotion in this league.
Journeyman's pretty harsh.
I think at this level, that's absolutely what he is. Every time.
I'd argue he's on his way up.
Yeah.
Really? Every time Preston fans are getting fed up with him. Every time.
Preston fans were gutted he went. Let's be real here.
Yeah, I'd agree that
There
again.
are complaints about the style of football. I
hate that argument.
All right, let's let's not all
every
do
time
each other.
anything more than staying up's been expected of him in the Championship, he's been sacked. Huddersfield didn't rate him. Leeds didn't rate him. He left Blackpool, and he's left Preston, where they had no aspirations of ever going higher than when they were. What he did at Preston was transformative and impressive, but I do worry that we've hired somebody that has no record of being able to launch successful promotion campaigns in this division, and that we're just moving towards mediocrity, that we're sort of signing ourselves in to become. I worry that he's signing old players to win now, that it mightn't be good enough for the playoffs, and that we could just start a downward scale towards becoming an irrelevant Championship team. My biggest fear is Sunderland becoming Ipswich. In going for Grayson, when we could have bought a young manager like Heckingbottom, like Johnson, someone else in the league for a similar price, who, let's say, maybe the basement's lower, but there's also a higher ceiling there that's more likely to invest in young players. I do feel it was a mistake, and I do worry. Maybe I'm wrong. Derby were supposed to finish 8th this year. Maybe we are going to move up. Maybe we are on our way to better things. Maybe I overestimated how good the Championship is. But I am also concerned with what the club's doing, the direction it's going in, and what happens from here. So wait and see. But I'm not sure it's all roses with Grayson.
Well, I wouldn't say it's going to be, all fun and games. But he's not taken over a club like us before. Every team that he's had in the Championship, he's either got them out of League One and then has to build them again to take another step up. I mean, it's not guaranteed that you just bounce up leagues. I mean, I know Southampton and Leicester have done it, but he's to get a team like Leeds up, who were floundering in League One, to get them up and try it up again is a massive ask. Whereas he's been parachuted into a team that has the basis of being a top half championship team anyway, and makes a few additions to that. To say he's a bit of a journeyman, I think, is pretty harsh. I mean, he's moved. This is a step up in his career, and that must whoever hired him, Bain or Shaw, they've seen the work he's done at these other clubs and the success he's had, and thought, well, with a bit of a group of better players, then maybe he can get us into the playoffs. I mean, we're basing this all on one game, and I might be proved wrong, but I think it's a decent appointment. I mean, and when you say bring in someone like Heckingbottom, like, what's he ever done? I mean, I know he's young, but just because he's young doesn't mean he's going to do anything.
Completely agree.
The one thing I'd say back to that is I think you're underestimating how good that Leeds team was. With Snodgrass, Gradle, Howson, Johnson, Becchio. I think that Leeds team, at the time that he left it, was set up well for promotion. I think he was part of the problem rather than the solution there. That's the only thing I'd say
sell all
about
three of them. They had to sell them all. They all ended up selling them all to Norwich. So his hands were tied anyway.
Was he still there when they were sold, or was he sacked before that?
I do not know.
Well,
No,
let me jump in. For my part, I can completely see where Jimmy's coming from. Like there is that hesitancy, and not every Sunderland fan was happy to see Grayson come in. In fact, there were quite a few who were a bit gutted. I think in general, a lot of fans were deflated anyway because we were all expecting this huge scale change because we were taunted with, for a start, a manager that we all then did a lot of research on and we got really excited about. And then we were really excited about a takeover, so everything was going to change. But then it didn't change, and we ended up. I can see what he means. It seems like we ended up settling for a contingency plan. And if you settle for a contingency plan and move forward with the contingency plan, then obviously things aren't going to be as good as you would make them out to be. You've still got to make out like it was our great plan to bring in Grayson, and he was the right man for the job. And all these players that we brought them in deliberately because you have to sell season tickets, but inevitably, that's it. A lot of it's just lip service, isn't it? So I think Martin Bain and Ellis Short knew when Grayson came in that he was a bit of an unknown quantity, to be honest. I think that's why it's so important that we watch him, that we study him during this very early stage in the season, and that we take as much as we can get from games. Do you know what I mean? So we can really make an educated sort of opinion on the guy, I suppose. But talking about, just for a second, on what Jimmy was saying about Bain not bringing in young players and that. I mean, he did. This is the thing. He did bring in young players. He brought them in under Moyes, but he brought in young players. We got Ndong, we got McNair, we got, did Marjar come in under him as well? We got, Asoro came in under him. Or who else? There's more. So we do have young players coming in. Whether or not they've got any resale value is, of course, a completely different story. So whether he's bought well in that regard, but we have brought in at least half a dozen young lads, and we can't use them. We can't blood them as quickly as we'd like, and stick all of them straight in this level because we were expecting a very physical championship season. So that again would come with the old heads that have been brought in. But I think eventually we just sort of have to accept the obvious, to be honest with you, which is that we don't have any money, and I don't think it's a good thing. But at the same time, it wouldn't be good if Grayson threw his arms up in the air and went, "Oh, we've got no money. That's it. I can't work like this," and stormed out. So there are things that you can take from it, the positives that you can take from it. We just have to be realistic about what we've got on the table, what they're bringing, and all we can do is hope, I suppose. But I do completely understand both sides of that argument, to be honest.
I think we're underestimating as well that the job Grayson's done just in the past week. Morale was on the floor. We got beat 5-0 by Celtic in a joke of a match to satisfy some sponsors in what was supposed to be the 20th anniversary at the Stadium line. We then had the Darren Gibson debacle, and everybody's thinking, how bad is the rot here? Is Grayson going to be powerless? And he's managed to turn them around and get them playing as a unit on the field. And I think that's quite impressive following the chaotic week that he had before.
Let's talk about Darren Gibson, shall we? Because we haven't had a chance to do so on the pod. We didn't really discuss it. So, Darren Gibson, for those of you who missed it, I'm not sure there are many of you, but for those of you who did miss it, he was filmed at a pub on the night of the Celtic thrashing, what shall forever be known as the Celtic incident. Yeah, he was caught absolutely wasted, pissed out of his head, being hit with some admittedly very leading questions from some Sunderland fans. But I mean, who wants to take this question? I'll give it to you, James. What do you make of that whole Darren Gibson thing? That was good or bad? I mean, is he?
Well,
right?
it's terrible. Like, I mean,
Terrible.
I don't think any of us could disagree with actually what he said, because, like, he said there's too many players at the club that don't give a shit. And I would completely agree with that. He's one of them. He was the one who was out there off his face at the Ramside just after we got absolutely battered. And as Copley said, it was an absolute farce of a fixture. I mean, I'd like to. I wouldn't like. The lack of professionalism shown by him is quite staggering, really. I mean, it's the fact that his career has been on the turn for years now, and he's at a club that have paid some money for him. He's got a good opportunity to try and take his career forward. And after we go and get beat 5-0, he's out, getting smashed and talking to Sunderland fans. And you just think what he said was probably quite spot on, but he. I hope he was dealt with very, very severely. I think the bloke's a bit of a disgrace, if I'm honest. I really do.
Well, for me, I feel the same. I mean, personally, I'd have sacked him. I just sacked him.
Yeah.
I can completely see, like, people say, like, well, he was right. Do you know what I mean? There were some truth bombs dropped by Gibson that night. And they were leading questions, but I couldn't stand that. I couldn't stomach that. For me, I mean, I would probably. This is probably one of the main reasons one of the main reasons, one of 1,000 reasons I'm not a football manager. I always like to think that I'd be very strict on my players. If that was actually down to me, I would maintain discipline, because that's something that I believe is very important. Because things like that just take the piss. They completely undermine everything that you're doing, everything that the team is doing. We took the amount of stick that managers get from fans when managers come out and say, "Oh, well, this player's done that and this player's done that. I'm not happy with this player." It's, "Oh, you can't do that. You can't do that," because you're just shattering their confidence. I mean, how bad must it be when one of the most experienced players on your team, if not the most experienced Sunderland player, one of the most experienced players on your team, when you've got quite a few young lads in the team, and you're all expected to look up to this bloke, and this is what he's like, on camera, pissed out of his head, after a 5-0 match in which he did pretty much fuck all, and he's slagging everybody off. "Do you think I want us to be shit?" he says. Like, well, no, I expect you to play harder to make sure that doesn't happen. I don't expect you to come out and have a skinful afterwards. And if you did come out...
5 days before the start of the season.
Exactly, and if you did come out and have a skinful afterwards, I expect you to be intelligent enough to not get caught on camera talking about how shit the rest of your teammates are. So just in general, he ticks all kinds of bad boxes, to be honest. So, yeah, I would have fired him. I don't think it brings anything to the team. I think it would have sent a very, very powerful message to the Sunderland dressing room that perhaps they need in this drinking culture. I mean, obviously, no one stopped him from doing this. I mean, I don't know if he was pinned by the neck against John O'Shea and goes, "No, lad, you can't go out and get drunk." Of course he's not. No one's going to stop him. And I bet you his mates knew he was going out on the lash. I bet you someone did. So there's no real discipline in that dressing room if that's going to happen. I don't care that it was pre-season. As you just said, 5 days before the season. And it's not just the season. It's probably the most important season we've had in 10 years, because we're not, it's like, yeah, when we're dancing with relegation and just about clawing our way back up, that's important, that's magical, that's miraculous, but it's not as important as where we are now. Now we're in the Championship. Now we've got to prove that we were actually worth being in the Premier League by actually going back there again, even with a shit team and with no money. If we go back now, that will be important. Being in the Premier League for the last 10 years now means nothing. So to have one of your senior players acting like that, it just staggers me, and I'm amazed that all they had to say was, "It's being dealt with internally." Like, yeah, okay, what does that mean? Do you know what I mean?
Well,
give him a there is.
I don't think they really tell you. I mean, why did they need to? It's like stuff like that needs to be kept, behind closed doors. Yeah. I found it quite funny, really.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, to have one of your players say the words, "I'm fully committed to this team, there's no one more committed like me," absolutely smashed. It's something that kind of summed up our last 10 years. It's just how a wobbling drunk saying, "I love this club more than anything." I mean, it sounds like something I'd do. And then just look all these teammates shit. Well, absolutely
it sounds like something we all do.
It's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's like Dream Team.
He's the ultimate Sunderland fan, really, isn't he?
Yeah,
he contributes absolutely nothing to Sunderland on the pitch. Yeah, slag players when he's pissed. He's the ultimate Sunderland fan.
Yeah, he's me. That's what I do every Saturday. I go watch Sunderland, call them all shite, get really drunk, and then go home. And then, well, I don't offer people out for fights. I mean, that's a difference.
You're on thousands of pounds, though.
Yeah, true. I can't afford to drink in Ramside.
That's the disappointing thing is the sheer hypocrisy of it, that he's in the Ram side, battering on about people who don't want to give their all and don't care about the club. And he's pissed out of his skull. And although it is funny, I agree with you, it's frustrating for me as well, because if I had the skill set to be a professional footballer, to get anywhere near the Sunderland first team, I would work me arse off as hard as possible if there was even a sniff. And it's just frustrating that he doesn't see it as an honour or a pleasure. Even he doesn't even see it as a job. Or clearly, he doesn't even see it as a job that he has to act professionally in, because he's getting pissed 6 days before the season. And we've all been drunk, I'm sure, in this in this podcast. You try and train the day after you've had a skinful. You can't. I can't. I don't know about you. And that's going to have a knock-on effect 6 days later. What if we'd have needed him in that game? What if Cattermole picked up an injury? What if Ndongan picked up an injury? I just think it was a disgraceful. And I with Damo, it would have been nice to see him sacked.
It would have been interesting to see what the reaction would have been had he been brought on Friday, with it all still being a bit raw.
Brilliantly, that would have been.
Yeah, and then he was
I play better when I'm pissed, right? Just like
the Galloway celebration.
Yes, should have done that.
Right, well, we're running out of time, so we've got a few more things to cover. Let's move on now. Well, we've talked a little bit about our players, but let's focus specifically on them for a small amount of time. So debuts made, a lot of new players we had. Obviously, we've spoken about McGeady, but obviously Grabban, Vaughan, Galloway, Browning. I mean, someone said that Browning not very impressed. Was it Galloway? Not very impressed with Galloway. Yeah, not very impressed with Galloway. McGeady, we know was always. But I want to talk about Grabban. I think Grabban was a bit of a handful himself. I mean, it's his performance wasn't perfect by any means, and there's a lot that he has to do. There has to be a lot more coherence with his teammates. But he seemed committed and he seemed ready. He seemed eager for the challenge and things like that. So there was just something about the way he was running, his movement around the pitch, and I mean that penalty was quite decent. Carson also nearly got to that, by the way, which was like terrifying to me. Nearly got to that penalty. I'm sure he'd go off his fingers just before it went in, and I was just like, that would be typical if we'd missed like the last 3 penalties we'd taken. But for me, Grabban, I thought he did well. Vaughan, I'm still not impressed with. I think he's just running around. He's no real outlet. I mean, people have said already that he's like a version of Aldo, which is not what you want to be, really. Unless we can swap him for someone similar to Defoe, then it doesn't really serve us much purpose at the moment. I know there's still time in the transfer window, but from all accounts, we've got no money. I mean, we've got a couple of names being bandied about. What was it? McCormick on loan, and who else was it we were looking at?
Hugel, I think.
Hugel, Waghorn as well.
Elphick. Centre back.
So, I mean, of what we've got, I'll hit you with this one, Marcy. Of what we've got, what do you think we need when you look at the way the new players played?
Well, I'd say obviously we definitely need another striker. Just to kind of take the heat off Vaughan for a bit, and say possibly another left back, depending on when Oviedo's going to be fit again. Because Galloway, I mean, I saw him at that Hibs game in pre-season. He got torn to bits there, and he just seemed to be so miles out of position for the goal, and just got easily turned by Johnny Russell. So fullback, we obviously definitely need another centre back, because I can't see why they keep hold of Kone if they can get any, like say 10 million for him. I think he pedalled for that. I thought he played quite well on Friday night, but there's that issue. I reckon some Premier League teams are going to start off quite rich, panic, and then just give us 10 million, and then take Kone off our hands, which I think will probably be the best for all concerned. And in an ideal world, another attacking midfielder, because I don't want to just go into this season. McGeady's not going to. Well, he's going to get knocks or whatever. But then our other two options are Khazri and Honeyman, while Watmore's still injured. Khazri's probably going to get sold. I'd imagine so. So another either that number 10 role or another one to play out wide to support Vaughan and Grabban.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much spot on, to be honest. Kone, you'd assume he's getting sold. You just have to pray someone's stupid enough to buy him. You just have to pray someone thinks there's value in him. I think Ben Gibson's probably the quality centre-half on the market, so we need someone to take him, sit out on their top targets and get desperate and sign him. I mean, if West Ham go for him, that is sheer madness, but I really hope they do. So yeah, obviously he'd need replacing. I don't think Browning was particularly good. I feel as if with Browning and Galloway's a good footballer and Browning's a good defender. If you could combine the two, there's a good championship player there. Instead, what we've got is two average ones. So yeah, that would be a big one. Like Walshy said, number 10. I mean, McCormack, I think, can play off another striker. So I'd wonder if that might be the role we're looking for him for, or maybe he's going to be our number 9. But you'd imagine, yeah, another central striker, another attacking midfielder, at least one centre back, assuming Kone goes, and like Walsh, I think Kazri's probably going too.
What about you? What do you make of it all, Jimmy? James, sorry, I call you James now, don't I?
Yeah, I mean, looking at like the squad, I think the players we brought in, I think Browning's better than an average championship player. If I'm honest, I think he's looked pretty solid. I think I
agree with that.
He might have done a bit better for the first goal, but he looks very capable. I think he'll grow into a pretty solid player for us this season. I think to say he's an average championship footballer, I think that's a bit of an insult to him. I'd agree on Galloway. I think he looks maybe quite capable on the ball, but he just looks like a budget version of Van Aanholt, suspect at the back, but he's not actually going to contribute as much going forward. We're in dire need of a striker. I mean, Ross Cormack, obviously, he seems to be the one who's heavily linked, but with his attitude, I mean, obviously he's had him and Steve Bruce fallen out a couple of times, haven't they? Couldn't go to training because his gates were locked or something. Is he the kind of...
That was a fantastic story, that. Fantastic.
Is that the kind of player? We've been talking about, we've got this squad that all want to pull together, build this positive attitude. Do we want to bring in more players who are making excuses not to go to training because his gates are locked? I mean, next thing he's going to be in the Ram side with Darren Gibson.
Should all go.
Maybe we'll
we
go.
Should
Yeah,
all go, yeah.
I can't afford it, but we need a strikeout. We need another wide man. I hope we can keep hold of Kaz. I think he'll be an asset in this league. But if he does go, we're going to have to bring in probably two wide men because, as someone alluded to previously, McGeady has had some injury troubles in his career. What more we're almost uncertain of because it's such a serious injury he's coming back from. Hope he hits the ground running. But to be honest, we can't put too much pressure on the lad. I mean, he's probably not going to be fully fit really till November.
Well,
coming back.
Talking about it, to be honest, bringing up Watmore, we've got another question on Twitter. Stephen Barker, where do you see Watmore playing when fit, out wide or through the middle? Personally, would like to see him go through the middle. So I'll fire that at you, Copley. What do you make of it?
It depends on which Watmore returns because he relies so much on his pace, and the injury he's had's a pretty bad one. So how much will his pace be affected? I hope not too much, obviously, because it's one of his main assets. But I think to play in the centre, he needs to improve his finishing and he needs to develop a better first touch. I think if he's to play down the middle, I personally would play him on the wing. Maybe if he was fit, you would have started him over Honeyman. And he can use his pace to kind of panic defences and drive at the full-back and create some space for the guys in the centre. So I would play him on the wing.
Yeah, personally, I'm looking forward to the return of Duncan Watmore. I think similarly, as you say, we can't put too much pressure on him. I think there was a lot of like a big furor around Watmore when he people would say burst on the scene, but there's a lot of that to the pace. It was something we were missing at the Stadium of Light for a long time. So when a pacey player came into the team, and even just a winger who could outrun a fullback, was something that we were all going, oh, look at that, look at him go. But I mean, there was a couple of massive issues really with Watmore, which were not anything that couldn't be changed, but it was always just that he always kept his head down. It was like, I mean, I think they dubbed him Roadrunner, didn't they? But he spent so much time focusing on just keeping his legs pumping that often he would miss a pass or he'd miss the opportunity to shoot. And that's something that I hope we get if he comes back. And if he comes back like that, I want him on the wing. And every day of the week, considering he has an ability to cut inside as well, I would love to see him on the wing. I think he'd be wasted in the centre with pace like that, and I don't think he's tricky enough to go through two centre backs. I don't think that would work for him. So yeah, for my part, when he comes back, if he can keep his head up, I'll be playing on the wing.
We're going to have to be patient with him as well because it's quite a bad injury he's had. So if we're expecting Duncan Watmore to just turn up and instantly light up the Stadium of Light, I think it's going to be we can't place too much of an unrealistic expectation on his shoulders. We'll have to give him a bit of time to get back to fully fitness because it was a bad injury.
Yeah, well, good luck to him, I suppose. But we need as many reinforcements as we can possibly get. We'll be moving on very briefly, and then we'll be ending this because, unfortunately, as lovely as it is to speak to you all, and as much time as we could spend, we can't feasibly do that because we have things to do. I mean, I could sit here all night, and you'd probably listen to me, bless you. But yeah, we've got... We're going to ignore Bury because we've already spoken about them before on Roker Rapport. We have got that game coming up first. That'll be on Thursday on the horribly named Carabao Cup. Some cheap energy drink. I don't know where it's from. Is it from like Thai or something like that? It's horrible. I hate the way they do that. I hate the way they sell out naming rights to things. That's how you end up with shit stadiums and shit cup names and things like that. But whatever.
The Carabao Stadium.
Yeah,
That's what we've got in the post.
It's disgusting. But yeah, I'm going to pass you on to Tom for a moment. We're going to talk about the Norwich game. Because technically speaking, that's really the most important thing we've got coming up. So, Tom, Norwich, tell me about them.
East Anglia, new manager, had a bit of a kick-off. Alan Partridge. Norwich has 6 theatres and one of only 2 puppet theatres in the country, so that's something for you to do.
There you go.
Every day's a school day.
Yeah, exactly. Do you want more?
Yeah, hit me with more.
Do it.
Norwich Market, the largest open-air market in the UK. How
Can't wait.
Inhabitants of Norwich used to boast that it had a pub for every day of the year. It now does not. Darren Gibson, here we go.
Yeah.
They got that new... They're going down that Huddersfield route of employing Dortmund's reserve team manager and hoping for the best. They brought in a raft of players from Germania, and they've sold that one of the... what did he call Murphy? One of the Murphy's brothers have gone to Newcastle, and the Norwich fan that I know, they said Newcastle essentially bought the wrong brother, that his other brother is better. They had a credible 1-1 draw with Fulham away at the weekend, who Fulham are probably going to be up there. I'd imagine Norwich are going to challenge as well. I reckon they'd be in and around the playoffs. Carrow Road, we're not really great down there. It's a big, long trip, actually, for... considering we've got Bury on the Thursday and then again on the game on the Sunday. So, yeah, I mean, that's going to be a bit of the acid test of where we're going to go this season. It's another hard trip, and hopefully we'll do the business and we come back next week 4 points in the playoffs. And in the second round of the EFL Cup.
Yeah, that would be... I mean, I suppose the Carabao Cup, it seems less and less shit the further on we go through it. I imagine if we get to the finals or something like that, I'll be like super duper excited about it. But
it was so good last time, wasn't it? I mean, any time we can take over Covent Garden with last time, so bring it on.
Unbelievable. All right, so let's wrap it up then. What do you make of the Norwich game, James? How do you reckon we're going to fare?
To be honest, I have absolutely no idea because we don't know if Derby's a good yardstick to go on. Hopefully we perform as well as we did. Hopefully there's a couple of extra bodies in as well. I'd like to see. Hopefully Maggio will be fit by then. It'd be nice to have another option to play up top, and he looks a hell of a player. I think he's got a hell of a touch, and he's really quick. So, you know what? It's with Norwich are an unknown quantity this season. So are we. Hopefully we can just go down and give a good account of ourselves, and that's about it, really.
I'm going to go, I think, for Norwich, I think we could be looking at another draw again. Both teams kind of new managers feeling the way through the league. So I'm going to go for a draw, but hopefully we'll beat Bury midweek, and hopefully Vaughan scores, because Grayson and Vaughan need a bit of confidence. That first win would do us the world.
What do you make of it, Jimmy?
I hate doing this, but I'm going to sit on the fence as well. I hate doing this. I never do this, but I know nothing about Norwich, so I'm going to sit on the fence and say 1-1 draw.
That's a bit too fucking optimistic for you, isn't it? Christ.
I know. That's good to me.
Right, fair enough. Well, for my part, I think we're going to beat them. Actually, I've got some good feelings. Screw them. Just as bad as we are. So it's 50-50 chance. Right, well, that's all we have time for today, my friends, but be sure to tune in next week's episode where we'll be chatting about these 2 clashes in the shitty Carabao Cup and each against Norwich. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes and Acast, and check rokerreport.com for some brilliant daily content from our writers. This is The Rapport, signing off.